Eddie Van Halen's incredible tone and the secret on how you can achieve it relatively easily. So every single day I'm inundated with comments saying, how are you getting your tone? What are you doing? What's your secret? What kind of amp are you using? So for some of you, it might come as a shock that all these tones are coming from this amplitude. I almost never use an actual amplifier to get my tones for my YouTube videos or my shorts. Instead, I rely on software amps. Now, if you're interested in purchasing Amplitude, if you use my coupon code, you'll save 20%. Just type in the code in the description below and save money. Now, in this video, we're just going to talk about the core amp tone. I'm not going to go into the flanger or the phaser or the echoplex or any of that stuff. If you want to learn more about that stuff, I do go into depth with it in my course, Shred Like Ed. We also look at how to achieve the 5150 stereo tone, as well as Eddie's famous wet dry wet tone. So that's Shred Like Ed, check it out in the description below. So the core of this tone is basically just a plexi style amp plus an EQ pedal before it. Now, we'll talk about the EQ in a moment, but I'm going to disable it to start with. So I have two EQ pedals running right now. I'll explain what they do in a moment, but first let's talk about just the raw amp tone. So although you can hear I've got a bit of reverb and I have a tiny bit of compression on the end as well, the amp tone itself, it's very flubby. There's no definition there, it's very woofy and kind of fuzzy. And any rock or metal guitarist hates a flubby bottom end. We need it to be nice and tight. We hate a lack of definition. So even though some of the settings on this amp look extreme, they're really not. I could take this mid and I could take this treble and presence and turn them down to 5 and the tone hasn't changed that much. So that amp tone is really nothing to write home about. It's pretty flubby and it's pretty useless in its current state. Even with a bit of reverb and compression after it, it's still very useless for what we want to do. So we want to tighten it up a bit. And this is how we do it. The 10-band EQ. Now this 10-band EQ pedal helps us out in two ways. One, it lets us sculpt the way the tone hits the front of the amp. And this is vital if we want to avoid it sounding flubby. But there's also a second massive benefit that we'll get into in a moment. So you can see here on these two low-end sliders, I've reduced the bass hitting the front of the amp. So if we listen to it with it, it's a little bit tighter. It's still not where we want it to be, but it's a step in the right direction. If I turn it off, so it's ultra woofy. So we really just want to pull out those bass frequencies. Now, we can just lower these three sliders a bit more. See how the bottom end's tightened up a bit? So this change has helped a bit, but it's not quite all the way there. So we could even try and look at taking a bit of 250 out as well. Now weirdly, it's starting to sound a bit thin to me. So we're going to put that one back in, and this is where we introduce this other 6-band EQ. So when I was tinkering around in Amplitude, I found that if I just added this pedal and reduced that second slider all the way down, it took the bass out in a way that made it work really nicely. Now we've got that tight bottom end we want, especially when we're doing those hammer-ons from nowhere. We want that really tight, kind of tinkly sound. What I found is that if you're trying to play like Eddie and you don't have a tone that sounds like his tone, then it's going to be so much more difficult. Personally, I believe that if you're trying to learn to play like a certain guitarist, it's vital that you have a tone that responds in a similar way to what their tone does for their playing. If you want to learn to play like Hendrix, then a Dimebag Darrell tone probably won't work very well. And I think this is twice as important when you're learning to play like Eddie, because his playing has so many idiosyncrasies that were developed around the Brown sound. If you dial it in and get that nice tight bottom end happening, then you're going to find so many of his licks are suddenly way easy to play, especially the hammer-on from nowhere licks. If you try and play that with the wrong tone, it's going to sound terrible. Now, before I mention that this EQ pedal has two main benefits for our tone. Yes, we can sculpt the tone on the way into the amp, but right on the end of the pedal, we have a gain slider. So this is a wonderful thing because we can use this to push the amp. because the plexi in its original state does not quite have enough gain to do what we want to do. Okay, we probably don't want it all the way up there, but if we need it, it's there. So this effectively determines the gain of the whole setup. So using this slider, you can very accurately control the amount of gain you want, and you're no longer limited by the amp. Now let's pull it all the way out and see what happens. So that's almost a clean tone. Now in the first album, Eddie had a lot of gain generally. So if you want to crank the gain to get that early album sound, then I recommend compensating by reducing the bass. Because as you increase the gain, it gets a step closer to Flubtown. We don't like Flubtown. So make sure the more gain you have in here, the more you remove down here. But if you're trying to get more of a fair warning tone, then you probably want to back the gain off a bit. And then that'll give you room to increase the bass to compensate. So you can really use this to customize and sculpt your tone depending on what song you play. And I find with each Van Halen song that I cover, they all need a slight tweak. They might need a little bit more gain, or they might need a little bit more bottom end. So using this, you can really sculpt and finesse the tone you want. So this preset is my Ain't Talking About Love preset. It's included for free with my course, Shred Like Ed. And if you're an Yngwie Malmsteen fan as well, then you can get the Ultimate Shred Bundle, which contains Shred Like Ed, as well as my neoclassical shred course, Swedish Shred Secrets. Now, anything else you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments below. I'm looking forward to creating a bunch of new videos for you guys soon, so let me know in the comments below what you want to see. Do you want to see technique videos? Do you want to see song lessons? Do you want to see more videos on tone like this? Let me know in the comments below. All right, Shredders, thanks for watching. Check out one of these other videos.